Right, so Doctors Without Borders, or Medecins Sans Frontieres to give them their proper name, MSF, is a humanitarian aid charity most of us have heard of. From war zones to disease epidemics, they send doctors and nurses in to help, do sterling work, providing medical care and aid in places where, for whatever reason, there might not be very much available. Certainly right now this applies to Gaza, and they are very much there, very much present, working in their clearly marked vehicles, and of course Israel know they are there because they let them in. Nobody can go in or out of Gaza without Israel allowing it, of course, the biggest open-air prison on the planet as it is. MSF will be on the ground. They will go to where patients cannot reach hospitals. They will help move them. They will be working in hospitals as well to supplement staff numbers to cope with the crisis. But given the Israeli targeting of hospitals particularly, the horrifying and deeply disturbing footage and news that we've seen come out in recent days and weeks that MSF have found Israel to have deliberately targeted one of their own convoys now, well, can we really deny any longer that Israel are deliberately targeting medical aid, in which case, in Gaza, to strip the people there of that medical help they should expect or need under international law? Right, so hospital strikes going on in Gaza. Stories connected with these have been numerous, haven't they? From the bombing of hospitals to the apparent finding of Hamas tunnels underneath them to the IDF going into these hospitals and planting evidence basically to justify them having attacked them, making out that Hamas are basing themselves in them, that they're hiding weapons caches behind MRI machines. Notably, I still can't get over that one. But also we've seen the appalling reports of newborn babies dying, oxygen being cut off, doctors being driven out and preventing them from continuing to care for vulnerable infants who have gone on to die as a result. The stories of the IDF and their assaults on hospitals and medical staff are easily amongst the most gut-wrenching that I've heard, and the ones I found most profound, certainly the ones that affected me the most personally, because anyone with a heart, how can you not be affected by what we're seeing and hearing coming out of there right now? How anyone can hear those stories borne out by the staff involved and the condemnation globally, how you can't be moved by that, I don't know, because it just sickens me to my core. Surely it must, any normal, sensitive, right-thinking people who are watching that happen. But now, of course, targeting static hospital centres like hospitals taken alongside other public infrastructure in the north, it's impossible to say this isn't actually a genocide being enacted. It's not just hospitals after all, is it? It's refugee camps, it's schools, and a whole lot more. Homes being flattened too. You're a fool or just inherently dishonest or delusional to think otherwise in the face of the evidence of 2 months of Israeli assault on Gaza now, so far beyond a proportionate response to what Hamas did on October the 7th now, it's just insane. But of course, since the ceasefire, we've now seen attacks in central Gaza and attacks in southern Gaza. The IDF have now launched a ground invasion of southern Gaza, so that is now going to get even worse. And remember, this is where people were told to go to be safe. This is where the IDF sent them. Yet now it's become clear Israel didn't really mean that either. But coming back to the medical side of things, which is the emphasis of this video, if hospitals being targeted was supposed to be all about driving Hamas out of them, using civilians as human shields as Israel keep telling us, why target an aid convoy? Are Hamas now working for Doctors Without Borders then? This is about more than driving Hamas out of civilian infrastructure because Israel let Medecins Sans Frontieres in, let MSF in, to do what they do. And yet now they are being targeted? Perhaps we shouldn't be surprised. They've targeted civilian convoys as well, haven't they? They've targeted ambulances. This is about stopping aid, blocking aid, and stopping aid workers doing their work, all entirely against international law, and flying in the face of it. But with world leaders turning a blind eye still, something Israel are used to them doing for them, they are carrying on with impunity. They don't care who's watching or seeing them. They know they won't be held to account. And so the only people pushing these stories are the independent and alternative media, and a lot of foreign media as well, who are highlighting these matters. And this also isn't a new consequence of Israeli atrocity either, since the airstrike on an MSF convoy happened before the ceasefire. The investigation conducted now being available by MSF themselves. They've published it themselves. The incident in question happened on November the 18th. MSF using their well-marked vehicles to help evacuate people who couldn't evacuate themselves from Gaza City, up in the north of the Gaza Strip. This is from their own report, and I'm going to include details of the testimonies of one of their staff as well who went through all of this, because you really do need to hear it. On November 18th, 2023, a Doctors Without Borders / Medecins Sans Frontieres MSF evacuation convoy came under fire in Gaza City in what immediately appears to be a deliberate attack against clearly identified MSF vehicles. 2 people were killed, both family members of MSF staff, including one who was a volunteer supporting MSF medical teams at Al-Shifa Hospital. 2 weeks later, after collecting the testimonies of MSF staff who were present in the convoy that day, all elements point to the responsibility of the Israeli army for this attack. MSF has also collected testimonies regarding the destruction of 5 MSF vehicles and the severe damage caused to our clinic in Gaza City on November 20th. The vehicles and clinic were all clearly identifiable by the MSF logo. Their destruction can be attributed to an Israeli bulldozer and a heavy military vehicle. Before they were destroyed, these MSF vehicles were potential evidence for any independent investigation into the November 18th attack on the MSF convoy. In addition, shots were aimed at the MSF facilities where these colleagues were sheltering, leaving bullet holes in the interior walls. On November 24th, our staff witnessed the destruction of a minibus, also clearly identified by the MSF logo, by an Israeli tank. The MSF team in southern Gaza had sent this minibus following the destruction of the other vehicles a few days prior to facilitate the evacuation of colleagues in the north. The staff and family members who went through this ordeal had been trapped inside MSF facilities amidst heavy fighting with no electricity and limited access to food and water for almost 2 weeks before they were finally able to evacuate to southern Gaza on November 24th. Now this is what one of the MSF workers involved had to say on the events between November 18th and 24th that they were involved in. November 18th. We arrived at the checkpoint on Salah al-Din Street. I was in the 4th van. There were Israeli troops standing there and they asked us to move back to where we came from because there was no authorization. When we arrived at Al-Wahida Street, I saw tanks and snipers at the top of the buildings. I was terrified when I saw that the snipers and the tanks were pointing their weapons at us, especially at the 4th and 5th van in the convoy. They started opening fire at us, and when the bullet grazed my forehead, I got a superficial injury. The bullet hit my colleague Allah in the head. He sat next to me. He got a critical head injury and started bleeding massively. His head fell on the steering wheel, and I immediately retook control of the vehicle to move to the right of the street. We arrived at the clinic and started to try to give Allah life support, trying to stop the bleeding from his head. We couldn't do anything. He died while we were trying to save his life. We stood up, just shocked by his death and all that had happened to us. I was speechless and just not able to think. My kids were crying and people were discussing how to bury our colleague, and we had another person injured in the abdomen. November 20th. 2 days later, after the convoy attack, a bulldozer clearing the way for Israeli tanks came and damaged our cars and threw them from the right to the left side of the street. I was witnessing this from the window upstairs in MSF's Gaza clinic. When the bulldozer pushed aside the cars, the western wall of the clinic fell apart. Then the tank came and opened fire towards the MSF cars and vans. The MSF vans caught fire. I was in the clinic. The fire and the smoke came inside. We stood there thinking about how to stop the fire. So we moved the children and the women through the back doors to the other building, where MSF has the physiotherapy department. We closed the clinic doors and got inside. So the tanks were in the street outside the clinic. They kept coming back and forth for 4 days. November 24th, we used to take power and electricity from the guest house generators, but after this fire, the lines were all damaged and we had no power for 3 days. During these 3 days and before the truce, we had no electricity, no food, and no clean water at all. The first day of the truce, at 4:30 a.m., an Israeli tank destroyed the MSF minibus and cars that had been sent to us from the south of Gaza for our evacuation. A second attempt to rescue these people from southern Gaza by MSF also had to be cancelled as they were fired upon and also destroyed. On Friday the 24th of November, the ceasefire came into effect and they were finally able to evacuate and get south. This is just the most incredible, incredulous story. And MSF had to tell it themselves on their own website. I presume they couldn't trust any press to tell it for them the way they needed it to be told. Israel knew who these people are, but as we've seen before, they know who medical staff are as well. They know who the journalists are. They simply do not care, though. Do not believe international law applies to them because they are always getting excused for it, and so they keep getting away with hitting and targeting the wrong people. They have to be held accountable for that. MSF have demanded that Israel provide a formal explanation for this attack and have called for an independent investigation. Absolutely all of these things. They've got to be the bare minimum here. Enough of this shit. Enough of politicians acting as apologists. These are the people who just want to save as many lives as possible there, do the actual humanitarian work, and they are losing their own trying to do that. Israel has got to be held to account. We cannot have them getting away with acting like a rogue state, hiding behind accusation of racism to protect themselves. It's sick. I hope MSF get the response they're looking for. I won't hold my breath for that, though. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content out daily. Please do have your say on this story in the comments below and be part of the conversation. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation where Israel have implicated themselves already in hospital attacks. Not that they've been denying it for a while anymore, but they bent over backwards to fake some audio, trying to prove themselves right. It didn't take a lot to debunk it, showing they cannot be trusted on anything they say, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.